Welcome to the Black Swan Rising podcast, an L10 production. For transcriptions, show notes, and extras, please visit us at theblackswanrisingpodcast.com. Now, broadcasting across the world from the heart of the American Bible Belt, here is your host, Michael B. Rush.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Black Swan Rising podcast. I'm your host, Michael B. Rush. Today, I'm going to be talking about the Whore of Babylon, and I'm going to be talking about the Whore of Babylon in the context of the global conflicts that we see going on today. I think that the Whore of Babylon is awaking from its stupor and realizing that BRICS really has a path forward to threaten its very existence. And when I think that you use this as the reference point to talk about the events that are going on in the world today, things start making a lot more sense. In prior episodes, I've talked about BRICS, how they have been working to establish an alternate currency system that is backed by a basket of commodities that can challenge the West's fiat currency system that is largely based not on any kind of resource, but simply debt. And you have seen China, you've seen Russia, you've seen India, and some of the other BRICS countries start to hoard natural resources. And as a result of that, you saw an incredible run-up in precious metals, historic run-up. I think that by the end of January, silver had broken $120 per ounce. And then something crazy happened. On January 31st, you see silver just crash. I mean, it went from $120 an ounce to right now, it got to the low 60s. I mean, within the last couple of weeks, it actually even hit $57 an ounce. And this in a time when economic uncertainty is at record highs. You have rumors of a massive personal debt crisis where you've got major companies that are lending private credit that are losing their shorts. And you've got intelligent folks that are saying, hey, listen, this looks like it could be worse than the 2008 financial crisis. Then you have these wars going on, which also are creating economic uncertainty. You see the price of oil shooting, to the moon. Oil at the end of January was, $60 a barrel. Now, I've seen it go up as high as $130 because of this uncertainty. And normally, with this kind of uncertainty, you see silver going up as well and gold. But that is not what's going on. This is totally, totally bizarre that at the same time you have all of this uncertainty and auctions for U.S. debt are they're not getting the kind of interest that they have in the past. And the United States is, they have to refinance trillions of dollars of the COVID stimulus debt before June. And the global appetite for U.S. debt is diminishing. So usually this would also create the groundwork for incredible demand for gold and silver. But the opposite is true. You're seeing the price for this drop at the same time that financial security is on the ropes. And it really doesn't make any sense under the normal, if you're just looking at market fundamentals. What's going on is bonkers. It shouldn't be happening. However, what if, and this is the Black Swan Rising podcast, so we are taking theoretical what if scenarios. We're trying to look at the patterns that most people don't realize until the catastrophic events have already taken place, and then they look at everything with the normalcy bias stripped away, and then they can see it. But we're trying to piece this together right now before everything has fallen apart. And on this, Black Swan Rising podcast, we're trying to base everything in the scriptures. And when you read the scriptures, particularly those pertaining to the events leading up to the second coming, you have an epic struggle between the whore of Babylon and an alternate rising power. It's described as 10 horns. And on previous episodes, I have postulated that what if these 10 horns represent the 10 nations that belong to BRICS, that hate the whore and are in a death struggle to try to obtain financial supremacy. And if you look at the scriptures, the whore of Babylon gets wiped out as a result of this struggle. Friends, I think that if you couch everything that is going on in the world today from the perspective of the whore of Babylon, then I think things make a heck of a lot more sense. The whore of Babylon does not want to have a global currency that is backed by anything other than something that it has absolute control over. It has absolute control over the US dollar fiat currency right now. But it would lose that control if BRICS wins. If BRICS wins and we are now forced to settle in commodity-based currencies that are backed by something, then its financial power is greatly diminished. It's handicapped incredibly. And so now let's look at what's going on in the world today from this perspective. Since January, you have the United States going in and taking over Venezuela. Venezuela was critical to the BRICS nations in that it was the largest supply of oil in the West that they could leverage to not be denominated in US dollars. And the next largest player, that global player whose oil is not denominated in US dollars, is Iran. So is it just coincidence that we, in the first quarter of 2026, have now attacked both of those threats to the US currency, major threats? And you've seen, as a result of this, you have seen it's not only Iran and Venezuela, but it seems like the Ukraine has coordinated with this to attack Russia's oil infrastructure, something that they had not done previously. And now Russia is no longer exporting oil, or not oil, but refined oil, gas, diesel. They've put a complete ban on that. And the BRICS nations, from an energy perspective, they are being turned on their head, because now the Straits of Hormuz, where the vast majority of the world's oil comes from, is severely disrupted right now. And with Russia, who was an alternate supply, you now have Russia not exporting this. And so now you have articles. Now, China has prepared for something like this. They've got over 1 billion barrels of oil in reserve. It's almost as if they knew something like this was coming. But 1 billion barrel oil reserve for a country like China, you're talking this is only going to provide them, a 3 to 4 month cushion. And then they are going to be, reeling as, a result of this. So the economies of all of the BRICS nations now are under attack. Because if you take out energy, if you drive up the cost of energy, and there can be no doubt that the disruptions in Venezuela and Iran have had a massive inflationary impact on oil. And I believe that this is a calculated move by the Whore of Babylon to try to damage the BRICS nations. Because now what do you have going on? You have the economies of the BRIC nations that are in dire straits. And because they're in dire straits, they are now being forced to use their precious metal reserves to support their currencies. Russia has just passed a decree that they will no longer export gold. China had already done that. But now you're starting to see the central banks that were hoarding gold now starting to liquidate it, not because they want to, but because they have to in order to keep hyperinflation from coming in to their countries. You've seen this with Turkey recently, or India. If you look at some news articles in India right now, which is the I in BRICS, they are starting to have blackouts throughout the country because they do not have the fuel to keep their factories running. I mean, they are in dire straits. So with the global supply chains, it seems that what the U.S. and really, I would say the Whore of Babylon here, the Whore of Babylon is orchestrating this. It's clear that Americans do not want this. It's clear that this is what's going on in the world right now is political suicide. But it's happening anyway. And I believe that the reason that it's happening is because the Whore of Babylon wants it to happen. The Whore of Babylon has infiltrated most nations. Certainly, it's infiltrated the American deep state. It's infiltrated Mossad in Israel. This Whore of Babylon is up to its eyeballs. It's the puppet master between over all of these Epsteinian atrocities and blackmail, and it is clear that they are leveraging leaders to make this happen. And as a result, the pressure is off of precious metals, something that precious metals for all intents and purposes should be going through the roof right now. But because you have this incredible global supply chain catastrophe going on, you have these nation states now that need to start consuming their gold and silver just to survive. And I think that this is an orchestrated move because the United States does not need to do this. The United States is not dependent on the Middle East for oil. The United States has achieved energy independence. I believe that we actually import maybe less than 1% of our oil consumption from the Middle East. So this is something that is designed to impact the BRICS nations. And, so far, so good. It is accomplishing exactly what the Whore of Babylon wants. It is giving the Whore of Babylon a respite against these unbelievable pressures that it was experiencing. I mean, you had banks that were on the verge of going the way of Bear Stearns because of their precious metal shorts. And now that pressure is off. And it shouldn't be, but because of the way that this is being orchestrated, it's absolutely what's happening. And so the question becomes, what's next? What's the end goal? And the end goal for the Whore of Babylon is the decimation of the BRICS economies. And that is what it is going to try to achieve. And I think that they have been looking at this with the long game. Russia is a major exporter of energy. And so what has happened to Russia? Well, their natural gas pipelines have been destroyed and their refineries have been attacked. And now they are not exporting energy. And now we went into Iran saying that the purpose was to cripple their nuclear capabilities. Well, we're not talking about that anymore. We're talking about bombing their infrastructure for natural resources. We're talking about bombing their power plants. We're talking about bombing their oil fields and taking over the islands where they have their oil export infrastructure. We're talking about crippling the oil trade. That, in my opinion, this is what this was always about. It's about survival for the Whore of Babylon. Because when you read in the book of Revelation about the Whore of Babylon, the Whore of Babylon rules the nations through its economic control. And the BRICS was a major threat to that. And that is why I think that you are seeing what's going on in the world today. That's why I think you have this push to get Greenland so that we are completely independent of the BRICS nations for rare earth as well. And, all of these things that you're seeing going on, honestly, I don't think that this is Trump's agenda. I think that this is the Whore of Babylon's agenda. Because you look at Trump's base does not want us to go into Greenland and overtake it. Trump's base didn't want us to, go into Iran and get us into a big war. They didn't want us to, go in and take over Venezuela. I mean, these are anti-American things, but this is what the Whore of Babylon thrives on. And so I think that when you look at the events that are going on in the world today, the fact that you have a war over resources in the world, that you have the two historic forms of currency, gold and silver, both being pummeled right now at a time when they should be at all-time highs. And, BRICS, the gold and silver, that is the infrastructure that BRICS was building upon. And then, of course, oil and other natural resources. And now that is blowing up. And so BRICS, now they are the ones on the ropes. And in January, it was the Whore of Babylon that was on the ropes. Now it's BRICS. And, BRICS cannot focus on creating this competing currency if they can't keep the lights on in their own countries. If they are required to cannibalize their own precious metal reserves in order to keep their own currencies from collapsing. And these are the kinds of things that you're seeing. It's unnatural. The amount of pressure right now that is being exerted to suppress the price of gold and silver is astronomical. But you look at the pressures that are being applied on the global supply chain, it's astonishing what is happening. So, yeah, I think that you are going to see whipsaw activity here in the months, the weeks and months to come. This is not the kind of thing that you can indefinitely keep a lid on. At some point, this is going to explode. But we are in, we're going full bore. I should say, when I say we, I'm saying the Whore of Babylon is going full bore into this strategy right now. And but this is not the only battle that the Whore of Babylon is up against right now. The Whore of Babylon is one of the reasons that they are so arrogantly confident, apparently derives from their military power. And the Whore of Babylon, there are people on record that say that they have their own technology, that they are essentially a breakaway civilization, that they're the ones that are behind these craft recovery programs, the reverse engineering of these extraterrestrial crafts, and that they have been using this not for the betterment of America, but for the ensuring of their own power base. And this disclosure phenomenon that has been gaining traction in the United States is, and not just the United States, globally, but this, mounting pressure to shine the light on what is really going on, this is another front that the Whore of Babylon is fighting simultaneously. Now, when you look at how the Whore of Babylon is destroyed, the Whore of Babylon is destroyed by the Antichrist and the 10 horns that join with the Antichrist. And it happens in a single day. And in fact, if you read in the book of Revelation, it happens in an hour, very quickly. All at once, it's over. But right now, the Whore of Babylon is mounting a major offensive. It is fighting for its survival. It has people that are trying to shine a light on this whole pedophilia aspect. You have the BRICS that are coming at it from a financial perspective. And now you have this disclosure that is trying to shine a light on all of its technological advancements and its hoarding of these kinds of resources. And, I think that's the natural thing, that if you really want to understand what's going on, you need to talk about that as well. So I'm going to share some clips of a recent interview between Congressman Tim Burchett from East Tennessee. And, this is an interview that he did, I believe it was on Newsmax. And, it's crazy. I'm going to let you just listen to it, and then we're going to go into a little more detail. So take a listen to this interview clip.
Former colleague of yours, Matt Gaetz, making some pretty shocking statements yesterday about aliens. Take a look.
I had someone come and brief me who was in a military uniform, worked for the United States Army, that was briefing me on the locations of hybrid breeding programs where captured aliens were breeding with humans to create some hybrid race that could engage in intergalactic communication. Aliens that were living were in forced breeding programs with humans that had been abducted from war zones and from even the caravans of migrants.
All right. I mean, I don't have the tinfoil hat on just yet, Congressman, but I'm wondering, kind of how you react to that, because you are connected. You're on the UFO subcommittee. I mean, I'm just wondering what you make of that. Have you heard anything like that?
Well, I'm still a member of Congress, so I can't really comment too much on what Matt said. But I will say this.
So wait, seriously? Are you being serious, or is that?
I'm being 100% serious. Okay. I've been 100% serious. I've been briefed by just about every alphabet agency there is. And I'll just tell you this. If they would release the things that I've seen, you would stay up. You'd be up at night worrying about or thinking about this stuff. We just need to disclose it all. I'm sick of it. Well, I was briefed. I'll just tell you this. I was briefed last week on an issue, or excuse me, 2 weeks ago, and it would have set the earth off. This country would have come unglued, I think, if they would have heard all that I heard. They would demand answers, and we need to. But it's never going to get. Unfortunately, it just keeps getting covered up, and the people that know are dying or disappearing, as the case may be.
Wow.
And for the record, I'm not suicidal, and I don't take risks. So,
I'm glad you said that. I'm speechless, Congressman. We will have you back.
You should be. And I told the president, release it all. And the problem is the people that are around the president don't know and the president doesn't know the questions to ask. A few of us are going to have to get with the president and tell him what he needs to ask and where he needs to look. I mean, we're in meetings and they have addresses and tell locations of items, I'll just say. And the public has a right to know that. It's your tax dollars.
Absolutely.
Let's get it out there.
You got my attention, Congressman. I appreciate you being as forthcoming as you have been tonight. And we look forward to having you back. Look, I know Donald Trump wants to disclose something. He hasn't done it yet, but I think he wants to be the president to do that. Tim Burchett, thank you.
He does. Yeah. He does.
Okay. So there's all kinds of things in that little interview clip that are just shocking. But the kind of overarching thing here is that somebody is trying to suppress this. I believe that we can assume that somebody is the Whore of Babylon. They do not want this disclosure to come out. The types of things that are happening are horrific. Yes, the congressman stated that if the country knew what was taking place, it would rip it apart, and that Trump is going to be the one to disclose this. So think about this. If the Whore of Babylon is going after the BRICS nations, which I absolutely believe that it is, with this kind of vigor, do you think it's going to go quietly into the night on this front? Absolutely not. Congressman Burchett said that the whistleblowers that are coming forward are starting to be killed and disappear. And this is obviously evidence of the Whore of Babylon fighting on that front as well. Now, if you have the President of the United States who says that he is going to disclose it all, and you have the prophecy of Ezra's eagle, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think they're just going to let that take place? And who are these people that are being disappeared? Well, let's talk about that. On February 27th of this year, there was something known as a silver alert issued in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Now, a silver alert is an alert for when an elderly person disappears. Now, this elderly person was none other than Major General Neil McCasland. And he's not just some guy. He is the man who once commanded the Air Force Research Laboratory. And he is in the middle of many of these bombshell claims made by whistleblowers like David Grush about craft being recovered and non-human life forms. General McCasland, is the guy who would have overseen the special access projects that would have been studying these kinds of things. And now he's gone. And he just disappeared without a trace. He didn't bring his phone. He didn't bring his wallet. He just walked out into the desert and no one's seen him. He just vanished. That is it. But if that is the only thing that we were talking about, then it could be looked at as, oh man, that's some strange one-off kind of a thing. But he did not have dementia. He was helping with disclosure. He was going to be a major threat to the deep state. And then he just disappears. But as the congressman said, there's lots of people that are dying and disappearing that are associated with this disclosure movement. So let's talk about another person. This is Monica Reza. Now, Monica Reza, she was a brilliant NASA Jet Propulsion laboratory engineer, and she specialized in exotic materials. She didn't just study these things, she reverse engineered them. So if you're the Whore of Babylon and you are engaged in reverse engineering recovered spacecraft, someone like Monica Reza is going to have the skill set that you are going to need to do some of these things. And that makes what happened to her very, very peculiar. Because on June 22nd of 2025, she just disappeared. And when I say she just disappeared, I mean it. She was hiking with her friends through the Mount Waterman, Los Angeles National Forest. And she's hiking with her friends, and all of a sudden, she's gone. She's nowhere to be seen. I mean, a massive search ensues, one of the biggest searches that have ever been conducted in that area. They bring in hundreds of people, canine units, drones. She's gone. She was walking with her friends. Her friend said that he looked back. She was 30 feet behind him. She smiled and waved at him. He walked for a couple of seconds, he said, turned back again, and she was gone. How does something like that happen? There's no footprints off trail. There's no evidence whatsoever. She just simply disappeared. And that is, given her skill set and the disclosure movement, that is very strange. And she's not the only person to disappear or to be killed under strange circumstances. You have Nuno Loureiro. He's a Portuguese guy, but he's also a renowned scientist, and he's the director of MIT's Plasma Science and Fusion Center. He was considered one of the world's leading experts in plasma physics, and he received the Presidential Early Career Award for scientists and engineers, which is, like the highest honor that a president can give somebody in this field. Such an honor would have been done in conjunction with the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy. And as a former commander of the Air Force's Research Laboratory, General McCaslin, he would have been involved in that kind of a decision. He would certainly have been involved in funding the programs that Nuno would have been involved in. Now, Nuno was also named as the Stanislaw Ulam Distinguished Scholar at Los Alamos National Laboratory in 2023. And General McCaslin's career of oversight of special access programs frequently intersected with Los Alamos. So these, Monica and Nuno, they are in the same orbit as General McCaslin. Okay. Now, when we say that Nuno was focused on plasma science and fusion technologies, what he was doing was studying how to suspend plasma in an electromagnetic field and then use it as a fuel source. Because, plasma it's like the sun. It's that kind of an energy source. And you could use it. If Monica was working on, exotic materials that could be used in designing the shell of a spacecraft, Nuno was working on the energy program or system that could power that spacecraft, because plasma can be harvested from stars. And yeah, the universe is filled with stars that if you could use that as your fuel source, you essentially have a gas station on every corner. So this is what Nuno was working on. Now we get to the strange part. On December 15th of 2025, Nuno was found shot to death. And this happened at his house. And, it's who shoots a scientist to death in Boston? I think it was, shot like at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's just, bizarre. But dead men tell no tales, right? So then you have another scientist, renowned scientist, that goes up missing. And this scientist, he was focused in a skill set that would be incredibly useful for navigation in space, because let's face it, space is different than navigating on the Earth. On the Earth, you can literally use the magnetic poles for GPS. You can use satellites, things like that. But when you are transversing in space, you don't have that. You need a different kind of skill set completely. And this is where the skill set of this next scientist comes into play, because this is what he was focused on. And I am talking about a scientist by the name of Carl Grillmeyer. And he was an astrophysicist at Caltech. And his specialty was galactic structure and exoplanetary atmospheres. He was the first scientist to ever detect water on a planet outside of our solar system. Now, his major focus was being able to track objects out in space, objects that were previously undetectable, such as asteroids that are dark, that don't have any sunlight shining off of them, or any other type of object that is not detectable with ordinary instruments. He developed a way to be able to track those things, and he was very successful at that. And he, on February 16th of this year, 2026, Carl was shot to death on his front porch in Llano, California. Now, Llano, California is located in a dark sky zone, which was ideal for him since he was an astronomer and studying, objects out in space. So now let's jump to the next strange disappearance. This is Jason Thomas. Now, Jason Thomas, he was a molecular biologist, and he worked for Novartis, which is a company that has a significant amount of Department of Defense contracts, and which brings him into the same orbit as General McCaslin. But his area of focus was studying bizarre mutations, molecular mutations that occur as a result of intense stimulus. Now, what do we mean by this? Well, I think that we should be understanding this from the perspective of the things that Dr. Gary Nolan, who's a Stanford professor, has talked about. Gary Nolan says that he had a couple of guys from some three-letter government agencies show up at his office in Stanford, and they provided numerous medical cases where there were military personnel who had these cancerous, blobs of tissue form on their brains under highly unusual conditions when they encountered these incredibly powerful energy fields surrounding UFOs. And these, tumors essentially showed up, overnight. This is exactly the kind of thing that Jason Thomas was studying. But Jason Thomas disappears. And he disappeared on December 12th of 2025. He and his wife had just come back from a little date night, and he had something on his mind. And he told his wife he just couldn't go to sleep. He needed to go out on a walk and clear his mind. He never returns. He's found 3 months later after the ice on a lake near their house melts. And he has been there, frozen in that lake for 3 months. Very weird. Again, like all of these other strange disappearances, there's, different stories that if you look at them all independently, maybe you just shrug them off, but one after another, after another, after another. And then you have the curious case of Melissa Casillas. Now, Melissa Casillas, she was an administrative assistant at Los Alamos National Laboratories. Now, administrative assistants, they're the folks that coordinate schedules and meetings. They're not necessarily the scientists that are doing those things. But if you are coordinating a special access project and you are getting people across multiple silos involved, then the administrative assistant who's coordinating those schedules and contacts, they're going to be doing that. It's not going to be the scientists themselves. And what happens to Melissa Casillas is very strange. Both her and her husband work at Los Alamos National Laboratory. Now, her husband said that they went into work together, that he saw Melissa scan her badge to get in, but then she turns around and tells her husband, hey, I got to go back home. I left something there. And so she goes back home, and that's the last her husband ever sees her. When they search the house, they find her work phone and her personal phone, both of which have been wiped and set back to factory settings. Somebody erased all of the contacts, all of the schedules, and just, they were blank devices sitting there on the counter. And she was nowhere to be found. What they do find are her clothes on the side of the freeway, and no trace of her. It's kind of like one of those. Frankly, it's very similar to the Monica Reza story, where she literally just disappeared. In fact, she disappears 4 days after Monica disappeared. And then you have, Senator Burchett, who he's getting all of these classified briefings that he can't talk about, but he says that the scientists and whistleblowers that have been coming to him are disappearing and showing up dead. And I don't know who he's talking about, but when I just do this Google search and find these scientists just recently disappearing, I think that these are the guys that Congressman Burchett is talking about. And so to me, it's clear that the Whore of Babylon is on the move in this front as well. For some reason, they don't want these people talking, and they're not going to talk now. And you have President Trump, who has said that he is going to disclose all of this stuff. You have, Congressman Burchett, who says, listen, I'm not feeling suicidal. I don't take risks. In other words, he's saying, listen, guys, I'm worried about the information that I have. I'm worried about my own life. This is saying that the Whore of Babylon doesn't want the kind of disclosure that is taking place they want to put the kibosh on it. They want to control this narrative. And if Trump is going to release all of these documents and these congressmen are going to work with him to make that happen, then you could see how this could, essentially force an Ezra's Eagle type scenario to take place. So, friends, the purpose of this episode is just, kind of a flashpoint for, kind of the state of the union. It seems that the Whore of Babylon is maybe in panic mode right now. And when you have a tiger backed into a corner, it starts doing crazy things because it is all about self-preservation. And I think that when you look at some of the current events that are going on and you look at it from the perspective of self-preservation of the Whore of Babylon, then a lot of the stuff makes a lot more sense. And then, again, you have some other things like, Chris Bledsoe. And, when he says that, frankly, I don't know what the heck to think of, Chris Bledsoe's conversations wherein he says that originally he was saying that the age of the divine feminine was going to start in April. Then he said it's going to start in August, end of August. I don't know. But regardless, he's saying that something is going to happen soon. And I don't know. It's very peculiar. But again, going back to how the Whore of Babylon is ultimately destroyed, it's destroyed by this Antichrist. And the Antichrist, it seems that it turns on the Whore of Babylon. Now, some of the crazy things from that news interview, I don't know what to make of that. I mean, they're talking about doing, these hybrid things. I don't know. That's just, it sounds crazy. It is crazy. And yet you've got some crazy things going on in the world right now. And I think that pressure is building. I think that it cannot, the kind of forces that are being suppressed and, managed right now, they're not going to, there isn't a pressure valve that is capable of bringing the situation back to normal. This is going to explode. And there will be casualties to this. And based off of the scriptures, we know that the Whore of Babylon will ultimately be the casualty here, and that this Antichrist figure is going to rise from that, and he will have saved the day. And that's going to put him in a position of global leadership. And, I've, talked about these things, extensively in other podcasts. I don't feel that I need to, rehash all of these things right now, but just wanted to put this out there because I think that it helps to place what's going on in the world around us in context. It's a sign of the times. This is not business as usual. What's going on, I think it's being coordinated. And I think it is best understood from the perspective of the Whore of Babylon in a desperate attempt to retain its power. And as a result of this death struggle, I think we are going to experience some catastrophic losses, and it's not going to go silently in the night. I think that in the weeks and months ahead, we are going to see some shocking events, epic events. things that are going to shake us to our very core. And as a result, we need to be working on those boxes for these kinds of things, these weird, bonkers things, because these are the kinds of things that make you throw the baby out with the bathwater. And if the gospel of Jesus Christ is true, then all of these things, regardless of how strange and weird and bonkers they sound, they can all be reconciled into one great whole. And the purpose of this Black Swan Rising podcast is to help you to do just that. But this podcast isn't enough. You need to engage in this process yourself. You need to think about these things. You need to seek for answers. For they that seek shall find. Until next time, friends, God bless.
You have just finished an episode of the Black Swan Rising podcast, an L10 production, hosted by Michael B. Rush. For show notes, transcriptions, and extras, please visit www.theblackswanrisingpodcast.com. If you enjoyed this episode, click the share button icon and send it to your friends and family. This will help to ensure the continued publication of future content. Michael thanks you in advance for sharing and looks forward to seeing you next time. Until then, keep seeking, for they that seek shall find.